Certainly good to see all who are with us today. We are going to be continuing in the series of lessons that we have been talking about of hope. With that being said, today's lesson has been titled that of hope when feeling empty. Now, I realize that this lesson is a lesson that could go two different ways. And as far as the way that we're looking at this morning would be that of the avenue that many people take in trying to find fullness through that of the world today and things of the world. Lord willing, in a couple of weeks from now, we'll be looking at a lesson that is titled that of hope when feeling alone, which will then take and cover the other side of this idea of emptiness. I wanted to make that clear so that we can take and have that mindset of understanding that what we are looking at is how that the world today, if we're not careful, can pull us away from the very things that God wants for us to do within our lives. I would encourage you to open your Bibles to the book of Ecclesiastes. We are going to start in the Old Testament and we will finish up in the New Testament. But I believe it as it is that we look at one who had tried to experience life, one that God gave more wisdom than any other, would be that of Solomon. And that example that is set forth for us here within the book of Ecclesiastes is one that is strong and one that is lasting. So we'll look at a number of different verses brought forth here in chapter 1 and also in chapter 4. There was a quote that I was reading, and I adapted it a little bit. I don't know if I had the leeway to do that or not, but I did. And I want to read that to you. And of course, hopefully you can see that behind me on the screen. It says, the hard work of sowing seed in what looks like a perfectly empty field has, as every farmer knows, a time of harvest. All suffering, all pain, all emptiness, all disappointment is seed. Sow it in God, and He will bring a crop of joy from it. When you look at this, you think about who we are today. We're just sort of small when it comes to the great big world that's all around us. The reality is that there are always things that are going on, and whenever we think about our own maybe desires that we have within our lives and the things that we chase after, we maybe feel that we are just not being successful, that we're really never filling up with what it is that we want in the terms of happiness as maybe the world has defined it. When we think about this quote within itself, we find that it gives this idea, and I know that we could get out on the highway as the fields have been harvested, and we could look to the right just as we go down a little ways, and we could see that empty field where there is nothing there. And that's how we would translate that field, as a field with nothing there. But yet we know next year when it comes around, Lord willing, and again that seed is planted, hopefully, right, Arnold? It comes back up, and again that harvest will be there. But as you look at that, we can take the idea of thinking, okay, something may appear empty, but you put the right thing in it, it's going to be okay. Our lives at times may feel empty because of all the difficulties and such that we go through in this chase of trying to have everything, that we feel empty. But the reality is, within all, is that there is one who can complete us, and that is God. It is God who can bring that joy in the crop of our lives today, if you would. This quote we will use probably in both of the lessons that we have set out before us. But when we think about that empty feeling within itself, there are consequences that come along with it. And again, I believe that this would apply to both lessons. Because you look at the fact that of the matter is that at times whenever we find ourselves maybe feeling empty, like we're never enough or we've never achieved what we wanted to achieve, therefore we find ourselves just not stepping forward in life because of that. We are hindered and we feel empty because we feel like we're failing. And when that failure sets in, what happens is that it keeps us from stepping forward in our relationships with our family and having a relationship with our family, a proper relationship with our friends, a relationship with the church, and especially with that of God. And what we see whenever we speak of that of God, of course, it is God who that we need the most, because He is the one that's able to bring that fullness within our lives that each and every one of us ought to be seeking for within that of our walk. So we look at that of the book of Ecclesiastes in chapter 1. And we read first here in verses 2 and 3. The King James Version says, "Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all this vanity. What profit hath a man of all of his labor which he taketh under the sun. There's one looser translation in the way that it reads. It says perfectly pointless. Everything is pointless. One sermon in which I stole from a little bit, it is there that they had taken and he had put forth the words of saying that it is as within our lives what we find that we are doing is that we are kind of stuck on that hamster's wheel and we're just running in circles. And that's how a lot of people feel about their lives. A lot of times people will look at life and have that empty feeling because all they feel like they're doing is running in a circle. When we look at what is described within this, we find that the idea then is brought forth that if we are just constantly in that circle running and running and running and running, don't we kind of ask at some juncture, what's the point? What's the point about what it is that we are going through? What's the point of what it is that we are doing? Well, let's look here within verse 3 of the text through verse 11. And we'll find here what the writer of Ecclesiastes wrote about as far as the point that he found. We start reading here in verse 3. What profit hath the man of all of his labor which he taketh under the sun? One generation passeth away, another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where he arose. The wind goeth toward the south, and turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again, according to his circuits. All of the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. All things are full of labor. We cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. The one thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Verse 10. Is there anything whereof it might be said, see, this is new? It hath been already of old time which was before us. There is no remembrance of the former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of the things that are to come with those that shall come after. When you take and you look at the search that he had here, could we not just say that he was unsatisfied? He wasn't finding the happiness or the life, the fullness maybe that he was seeking for within his life. And here's this man that has been considered the very architect, if you would, of wisdom. And yet we see that he is overwhelmed with that of life and thinking, okay, well, what's the benefit of it? Almost like being that hamster in that wheel, just running in circles and just getting nowhere, finding themselves only stuck. But can you not hear the emptiness in his voice? Maybe hearing the irritation of his words, saying here that a generation comes, but then a generation goes. The sun's going to rise and then it's going to set. The streams are going to flow into the sea. The sea's never going to get full. The eye is just never satisfied. When you look at that word futility within that of the Hebrew language, or the word vanity, what we find within is it brings out this sense of meaningless. But it goes on to show that it is saying that it is something that is of a vapor. And the point that is brought out within is saying that life of this world, and I stress that life of this world lacks substance. Our lives on this earth, I'll go ahead and give you the conclusion here, without God will lack substance. So when God is not in our lives, it's easy to feel empty. When God is not our focus, we're not going to look to him for anything. Therefore, we're going to keep trying within a world that cannot fulfill. We'll be like Solomon, just keep spinning our wheels in a sense, never getting anything out of life. As one writer had put it, he said, life is like cotton candy. It's a bite of sweetness, and then there's nothing. I guess there's a lot of sense to that. I've never eaten cotton candy that I can recall. I can't stand the looks of it. But when you take it, I've seen others eat it. It's just that you could take that big wad, if you would, of cotton candy, and it will disappear into nothing in a few bites. And that's sometimes what life is sort of like. When we think about the idea here of the writer of the book of Ecclesiastes, he's in the things that he is speaking about as far as that of the sense of vanity. He is talking about an emptiness of life, and he's going on and then in essence and saying, it's just a vapor. It just develops into nothing. I believe that there are times in our lives that we feel like that. I believe when we look at just life from Monday to Monday again, sometimes we feel like we're just in a rotation. And as we go through that rotation, what we find at times, because of all the difficulties that then upon us, we start to feel the weight of the world before us. And then before you know it, you're starting to bemoan every Monday that comes around. And it feels like you're just on that hamster's wheel again, and you're just trying to make it till Friday so that you can have a weekend to be able to rest. But then as that vapor goes, what happens to the weekend? It's gone. And right back to the grind again on Monday. What does God want us to know? What does God want us to take from the example of the book of Ecclesiastes that has been given to us? We know it's here for our learning. So what's God want us to be able to grasp from this? When we look at life, and we'll look, of course, at Solomon's conclusion in a few moments, but one of the things that we find within this, whenever we talk about our hope in life without God will always be pointless. Without God, we will feel like we are living a vain life. Without God, we will have that sense of emptiness, a meaningless that will sit before us. So as we look at God, what we need to understand about God, to understand the context of this and what it is that we are truly talking about. And I know this statement takes a little bit to qualify it, but God made life to be futile and empty. If he made this life on this earth here without God to fill every void in our body, ask you a question. Would you need God? If the world provided you everything you need, would you need God? No. See, we can't get caught up in the things of the world. We can't let the world be the center of our lives. We can't put our hope in the world today. Our hope has to be within God. We have to realize that it is God who will fill us, who completes us, who fills that very void that will be within us. And we look here again within Ecclesiastes, but now we start reading within verse 13 of chapter 1. And we'll read through verse 15. It says, "And I gave my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom concerning all of the things that are done under the heavens. The sore travail hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised therewith. I have seen all of the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of the spirit." When we think about happiness and his search that he had set out for happiness, without God, it is doomed. Without God, we're empty. Every Monday that we live is a blessing because of God. Every Monday we get to go to work is a blessing because of God. Every Tuesday we live is a blessing of God. And we can, of course, look at that in every single day of the week and month and year as we just continue to repeat it over and over. The reality is that it's a great blessing that comes from God. So when we look at this, the point that we need to understand is that when we are in God, we will find purpose. But God has made the pursuit of the things of this world today to be unsatisfied. Just as Solomon could not find happiness in the things of the world, I guarantee you there's not a single one of us that have ever found true happiness in the things